Hi friends, I am here in Illustrator and today we're going to look at taking our Illustrator symbol geometry and moving that into After Effects. So at the end of the last tutorial video you were asked to save this layout as a JPEG, and that is because the first way of moving your geometry into After Effects is by using that JPEG as a template. So there's only one thing you need to know when saving your JPEG for this reason, is that because After Effects is a video program, it deals in RGB instead of the CMYK colors that are for print. So when I go to export and I save my JPEG, you just want to remember that your color model needs to be RGB, otherwise you'll end up with some errors when you get to After Effects. So I'm going to hit OK and we'll just move into After Effects here. You can see I have my 1920 by 1080 document for video, and I'm just going to go to File and import my JPEG here. So when I move that onto the stage, you can see it's nice and big. I'm going to move down to the timeline and use my transform tools to just scale that down a little bit so it fits on the screen. And now we can use this geometry JPEG as a sort of template and trace over our geometry again. Now you can understand that this could get very complicated if we have very unusual shapes with lots of detail. So if you're going to use this method, just make sure your symbols and shapes have a very simple outline. So what I've done is just grabbed my pen tool up in the toolbar, just like in Illustrator, and it has exactly the same controls, and I've just drawn my straight triangle, and you can see in the timeline that it's appeared as a shape layer. And the most important thing for creating your geometry is making sure that in amongst all of these drop down menus you have the path, because the path is what we're going to keyframe later on. So that is one way you can bring in that JPEG and literally just trace over the top of what you have. But there is another way, slightly more complicated, but I think it could be a better option for those of you with slightly more detailed symbol shapes. So we're going to head back to Illustrator, and you have the option of two ways of sort of achieving the same result here. The first one is to actually save your Illustrator file as an Illustrator file instead of a JPEG. So I have my geometry.ai here. I'm just going to save that again, and you can ignore most of what's on this little option pop-up. So now I've saved my file, I'm going to head back into After Effects, and I'm going to actually import a file, and I'm going to import my After Effects file. Now the important part here is not to go ahead and press open immediately. You want to go down to the Import As button and make sure that that is sitting at Composition. So when you open that up, you actually have, under here, you have your After Effects file, and you can drag that straight into the timeline, and you can see that if I zoom out, you can see that my geometry from After Effects is already here on the stage. Now the problem with this is that we do not have those path options, which is not very good when it comes to animating, because these are actually all joined together, and they are all well, they're not paths at the moment. So to change them into paths, we can click on our layer just here and right click there, and you can see it says create shapes from vector layer. So if we click on that, we can see that we have now a shape layer on top, and we can see the outlines around this geometry. If I even delete the After Effects file, you can see we still have our geometry, and as we go through this drop down menu, you can see that we have these individual groups and they have the paths within them. So group 1, if I click on it, that's the pink shape, group 2 is the green, group 3 is the red, and group 4 is the blue. So this way you can work within the geometry outlines area and just work with your individual groups. You can see that they each have their own transform option, so you can go ahead and transform in that. But I find that this could get a little confusing if you have a lot of individual shapes and if you need them separated. So the final and probably the best way to import your geometry is to, I'm just going to head back into Illustrator, and the reason why all of these things were kind of combined and being brought in together on the same Illustrator file is because they're actually in one layer. You can see that we have multiple paths, but they're all kept under the same layer. So we need to bring these paths out into their own layers, and the way that we can do that is to right click on our layer in Illustrator. Nope, instead of right clicking we can go to this little menu on the top right, and we can click Release to Layers. Now make sure you're clicking the Sequence button. That will do individual geometry. The build will actually kind of progressively add in the symbols. So we want to Release to Layers Sequence, and you can see underneath we have sub-layers of the individual symbols, or shapes, sorry. And then all you need to do is select the sub-layers and drag them above your layer 3. And now you can see we have them as full layers and they're not subordinate to the top layer. So I'm going to go ahead and delete layer 3 because that just seems to be the white background. And we have our 4 individual shape layers. Now you can save that back as a normal Illustrator file. You do not need to change anything with the options. Just hit OK. But then when we go back into Adobe After Effects and we go to File and Import, when we hit our After Effects, sorry I get them confused, our Illustrator file, in the Import As section you want to make sure you are hitting Composition, Retain Layer Size, and that's going to split all those layers up for us. So you can see when I hit Open, we again have the Geometry Layers folder, but underneath we have 4 different Illustrator files, and they are our individual shapes. So we have layer 6 is the triangle, layer 5 there is the circle, layer 4 is my square, and layer 2 is the strange pink object. And the last step in this importing option is changing these into shape layers, because at the moment they are acting like solid geometry. And that's very easy to do in After Effects. You can select them all. No, you can't. You can select them one at a time and right click and go Create Shapes from Vector Layer, just as we did before. So if you do that one at a time, create shapes and create shapes for the last one, then we can actually just delete the After Effects files, sorry, the Illustrator files, and now we have individual layers for our individual shapes, and they all have their little paths inside them, which is perfect. So then again you can go in and rename, so this is pink, or odd shape, and I can make the layer pink so I can match it to the colour. It's not a very good pink, let's do fuchsia. There we go. And you can go through and just rename all of these and make them very easy to recognize and very easy to move around. So that is how you will import your geometry to After Effects. There are 3 ways of doing it, use whichever one suits you best, and we'll be back with more tutorials on animation.